Order. Call this meeting to order. Thank you, Mr. McTagg. This is the another meeting, a joint meeting of the Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology and the Standing Committee on Finance, pursuant to Standing Order 1082, continuing our study of credit card interchange fees and the debit payment system in Canada. We have colleagues with us here today, the Interac Association. We have the President and CEO, Mr. Mark O'Connell. Welcome, sir. And we have you, I believe, for the full session here today. So you have time for an opening statement of up to 10 minutes, and then we'll go to questions from members. So please begin your opening statement at any time.
Merci, Monsieur Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, members of this committee.
Opportunity. Although the hearings to date have focused more on the credit card issues, I am here to talk about the evolution of the debit market, an important topic given that Canadians are the second highest users of debit in the world. The debit market is changing, and how it evolves is going to have a significant impact on Canadian merchants and consumers well into the future. Now, let me be clear. There is a great deal of competition in the Canadian payments marketplace, and we welcome additional competition at Interac. That is not the core issue. The core issue is the need to have a level playing field. I will address this issue as I talk about where we want to take Interac, a great Canadian gem, and what needs to happen to ensure that all stakeholders, issuers, acquirers, merchants, and consumers continue to be well served in this debit marketplace. As I do so, I will also set the record straight about some comments made by others about our business so that you can accurately understand who we are and why our continued viability is so important to the Canadian marketplace. Turning to slide 2, without question, Canadians love Interac and Interac Debit. It's 24/7 convenience, reliability, and security. In short, Interac is a Canadian successful world-class debit payment system. Interac Association, which was first formed 25 years ago in 1984, is responsible for the operations of the network. Our members are not just the banks. Our membership also includes credit unions, other financial institutions, payment and technology companies, and we even have a merchant represented on our board. As a payment network, we do not issue payment cards or own or operate ABMs or merchant point-of-sale terminals, and we do not charge fees to merchants or to consumers. Interac is Canada's only domestically run coast-to-coast debit payment network. We are the only homegrown payment brand. Interac operates on a world-class, efficient national payments infrastructure with leading-edge security. And we have the only debit payment product that clears and settles under the rules of the Canadian Payments Association with their built-in solvency, liquidity, and other protections. Interac is Canadians' preferred and leading payment option, and we have a long-standing track record of being merchants' low-cost payment option. We offer a suite of trusted solutions for merchants and consumers across both the physical and the online space. Now, turning to slide 3, I will address that suite of solutions. Many of you will know the first two are main products. The first is shared cash dispensing, and this is the service upon which Interac was founded. And it allows Canadians to withdraw money at ABMs from across the country at ABMs that do not belong to their financial institution. And our largest service by volume is Interac Direct Payment, which is a real-time, ubiquitous, PIN-based national debit service that allows Canadians to make purchases at retailers across Canada. Now, we also offer cross-border debit, which allows Canadian travelers to pay with their debit card at nearly 2 million point-of-sale locations in the United States through our partnership with the NICE network, which covers about 80% of the U.S. market. And there are more partnerships in the plans and in the works. Now, despite the views expressed by others, Interac is also indeed in the online space. The first product is Interac Email Money Transfer. It allows Canadians to send and receive money across the country in near real time from one bank account to the other. Transactions are done quickly and securely through web banking without the sender needing to know any of the recipient's banking information, only their email address. The second is Interac Online, a unique solution that allows Canadian internet shoppers to securely make online purchases directly from their bank account without providing any personal financial information to the merchant, not even a card number. It is offered by some prominent Canadian online merchants, including Via Rail, the telecommunications companies Rogers, TELUS, Virgin Mobile, charities like the Canadian Red Cross, numerous universities, municipalities, and other leading retailers such as Dell, which recently went live 2 days ago. Now, these are great products, but I will acknowledge that growing them has been hindered by the challenges that underscore our governance problems, which I will talk to shortly. Now, moving on to slide 4, having addressed the myth that we lack an online payment solution, let me turn to the security claims of our competitors. Interac is and has been throughout its history a leader in the prevention, detection, and management of debit card fraud. We see investments in security as investments in the payment franchise itself. Our multi-layered strategy includes significant investments in consumer and merchant education and, of course, our ongoing migration to chip technology. And we are delivering unique and powerful fraud management tools to our members. This investment has been ongoing, but it must be sustained and increased in the future. In fact, this investment has played a part in the industry enabling its first overall declines in debit card fraud levels in many years. In 2008, debit card fraud declined by 3% to $104 million after years of steady growth. By contrast, according to the CBA's testimony before this very committee, our counterparts in the credit card industry saw fraud losses increase by 34% to $500 million. And in the all-important web arena, the unique design of the Interac Online product I just described to you makes it one of the most secure electronic payment methods available anywhere, boasting a fraud loss ratio of 1 basis point versus 78 basis points for online credit card transactions and card-not-present transactions in the UK, for example. I believe it is superior in this respect to the online debit options offered by the credit card companies. Now, on slide 5, I will turn to the matter of fees and how Interac covers the cost of operating the Interac direct payment service. As I noted earlier, Interac Debit has always been a low-cost payment option for merchants. On a debit transaction, Interac receives a switch fee from acquirers and issuers to process that transaction. The association operates on a consent order mandated cost recovery basis, with these switch fees set solely to recover the operating expenditures of the association on an annual basis. This flat rate switch fee is currently 0.8 of a cent per transaction. And historically, our fees have varied from year to year from about 0.4 of a cent to 0.8 of a cent. Now, as you have heard in their testimony, MasterCard's switch fee is currently 0.5 cents per transaction on their Maestro debit product in Canada. Let me reiterate that Interac operates today solely on a cost recovery basis, with very modest marketing budgets and almost no research and development. Now, I'm not privy to the strategic approach that they are employing as they enter the Canadian market, and although it is tempting, I am not going to speculate. I can say, however, that this rate is dramatically lower than MasterCard and Maestro debit pricing in any other market in the world that I know of. Interac's position in the Canadian marketplace is clear and rooted. Interac has a long-standing track record of being a low-cost provider. It has been our strategy, and it will continue to be our strategy. Now, as you have heard from the merchant community,
You have about 1 minute, Mr.
the payment processors and financial institutions, there is a broad consensus that, against the backdrop of a rapidly changing marketplace, Interac must also change. Our current association and cost recovery structures are outdated and are not sustainable. Since 1996, we've operated under a consent order that is tremendously constraining across all facets of our business. Throughout the world, it has been recognized that associations tend to be slow and ponderous, moving at the pace of the slowest. We are clearly at a competitive disadvantage. The debit products that Visa and MasterCard are putting into market today are similar to the Interac product where your bank account is debited when you make a purchase using your debit card. These companies have tremendous experience gaining market share rapidly at the expense of domestic providers. Through the debit wars in the United States, this is evidenced, and we are seeing the same type of strategies being employed here as they aggressively work to sign up issuers, acquirers, and merchants. You heard directly from the acquirers that this is happening. They are receiving financial incentives to develop and market these products and applications and are now facing penalties if they do not. Time is of the essence. Change needs to happen, and it needs to happen quickly. Arriving at this point, we are in discussions with the Competition Bureau regarding the consent order and changes to our internal structure. Our governance structure needs to change, and we need to generate organic capital for reinvestment in the business and to be governed independently from our participants. Third, preserving Interac requires greater investment in infrastructure and innovation, and this means some changes to the pricing system for Interac products in a manner that meets the needs of the business, but also respects our legacy and ongoing strategy of being a low-cost provider.
Okay.
Now, without...
Sorry, we're way over opening statement time here. Unless members want him to finish, but it's 10 minutes max. Do members want him to finish the statement? Okay. I just remind you.
Thank you. Thank you.
The Minister of Finance did it in less than 10 minutes, I will say, though, but go ahead.
Thank you, John.
Order. Mr. O'Connell, please continue.
Thank you, Jim. As I was saying, preserving Interac requires greater investment in infrastructure and innovation, and this does mean changes to the pricing system for Interac products in a manner that meets the needs of the business, but also respecting our strategy of being a low-cost provider. Now, this is important. Without firm numbers, I know that this is a trust me statement. And I have faced questions about the intent and our intent in pursuing a for-profit status. And I've heard clearly the concerns expressed about the potential for excessive profit-taking. I can tell you that we are committed to staying a low-cost provider. In this regard, I offer to make available our financial statements on an annual basis for scrutiny by the Department of Finance, and we are willing to enshrine this commitment. We will stand up and we will be accountable. Now, Interac needs to change. On slide 8, I hope this has been well established. But my point here today is that internal changes to our organization are not enough to ensure a healthy debit marketplace in Canada. The Canadian the payment system is a national infrastructure, and it should be viewed through that lens. A level playing field is an essential foundation to any competitive market. This committee has heard testimony from all stakeholders about the need for transparency in cardholder choice, in merchant choice, and having the same basic rules for all players in the game. I echo these sentiments, but unfortunately this level playing field is not a reality today. Clear information on service offerings and their associated cost, and being able to act on this information with choice, should be hallmarks of the Canadian debit market and of competition in this market. They are at the heart of our business model and our strategy. We are going to continue to be upfront with our customers about our service offerings and our fees, and we hope that the marketplace can follow this example and provide consumers and merchants with clear and understandable choices. When given the right foundations, if this level playing field is in effect, competition can indeed be effective in delivering the best outcomes to all participants. When these foundations are not in place, however, the result will not benefit the users of the system, and Interac will not be successful. And so, in conclusion, let me restate that we welcome new competition, but we firmly believe that participants should operate on a level playing field and that transparency should be a hallmark of our debit system where choice is given to its users. Interac competing against the Visas and MasterCards of the world does not mean we will adopt their strategies. In fact, from consulting with and watching our counterparts from around the world, that is a no-win approach. Interac instead will continue to operate true to its Canadian roots, capitalizing and leveraging our differences, not seeking to eliminate them. One of the strategic advantages for Interac comes from being a low-cost payment option with per-transaction flat-fee pricing. Any changes to the pricing structure will be mindful of those principles, and we are committed to proving that by opening our books to the federal government. Given the forces at play, however, the change that I have identified must happen. If it doesn't, if we are not allowed to compete on a level playing field with these U.S. competitors, Canada's only payment brand and network will be hobbled, and we will not be able to provide Canadians with the services that they demand and that they deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to questions from members. We start with Mr. McTague. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And Mr. O'Connell, thank you for being here. And I think you've answered or certainly addressed a number of issues that this committee has been looking forward to tackling. I will go very quickly to the underlying concern that I have, and I think many of us here on this table share. You already have the power under the mandate given to you to set interchange rates as well as to set fees high enough to generate revenue for the kind of innovation you're referring to, which you tend to believe are hobbling you. My question to you is, why do you need the ability now to make profit, and do you not see that as an opening for your competitors to come in and offer in the credit system exactly what they now may propose to do in the debit system, which might ultimately lead to you no longer being in business?
So you are correct in your first assertion that even under the association model, interchange is currently set at 0. And under the consent order, a majority vote of the board could change that rate. But I think that underscores that we're going through this restructuring because it isn't about interchange. It's about an organization that's been frozen in time for 15 years in a model that has proven around the world to be slow and ponderous. And that gets to your second point, where I would challenge the assertion that under our governance structure, that we actually have the ability to respond in a timely fashion to a very, as you have heard through testimony, how fast this marketplace is changing, with respect to the required investment that the organization needs and in raising those funds. So I think that that's what we are trying to do here. We are trying to get an independently governed organization that has the ability to raise organic capital pools, to invest in the business as it sees fit, and in a manner that is not taking 5 board meetings to decide whether we're going to respond to a certain market event, and allows that outcomes are dictated by competition and not any other factors.
At that point, Mr. O'Connell, I appreciate that. Since you are in many respects governed, worked with credit unions, the banks, they are also being competed with on the credit side by the MasterCards and the Visas of this world. There is, of course, an advantage which they have on the credit side, which you simply do not have on the credit side, and that's the issue of priority routing. In that kind of scenario, given that you are currently governed by banks who may be enticed, who may be induced, who may be interested or entreated with higher rewards, higher incentives, how do you find you're going to be able to compete when priority routing leaves you literally out of the loop?
With respect to priority routing, and does everyone understand exactly priority routing? So to define priority routing, it starts with the financial institution that issues the debit card. If a financial institution chooses to use the same debit card to offer 2 competing networks on it, the financial institution can either predetermine which network is processed first at the point of sale, or they can allow the cardholder to choose which option that they prefer. So when a financial institution predetermines that option, that's priority routing. And so if a merchant, for example, accepts all of the brands or networks that are on that card, the terminal will automatically pre-select the predetermined option and process the transaction.
And Mr. O'Connell, I think we understand that. I want to know how Interact is going to respond, how they're going to handle that in the onslaught of competition, should it come forward, as you suggest, through nonprofit.
I just want to make sure everyone understood it first, but I do have significant concerns with priority routing. It is contrary to my stated strategies and beliefs of consumer choice and of merchant choice. So we are working through those things with the board, but I do have issues with it with respect to a competitive standpoint.
So let me ask what will happen to Interact in the scenario where if you're looking at certain plans, what will happen to Interact if priority routing becomes, in fact, commonplace, as we feel perhaps some of us here it will? What happens to Interact in that kind of scenario?
I think that it may have, we're certainly going to have to look at our strategies. It would have some detrimental effects to those. And again, if we are putting our strategies, our pricing in the hands of merchants and consumer choice, if that choice is not available to them, then we would have to revert back and look at our strategies, and I think it would be very detrimental to Interact's future, because I think one of the most important things that I'm the CEO of Interact and the custodian of the brand, and priority routing also has confusion with respect to the brand. A consumer may think they are doing an Interact transaction when in fact they are using a competing brand with all of its different terms and services and so forth. I think the Interact brand is very strong in the Canadian marketplace. I know it is very strong with respect to the merchants. Our history of partnership and clear and transparent dealings with the merchants. Our strategy is based on merchants being able to choose and or influence the choice of
Appreciate
consumers.
that, Mr. O'Connell. Maybe my last question to you, my colleagues will follow up. Do you envision having your own policy or purpose or practice of establishing your own priority routing to meet that competition?
We believe in fair competition. We are working through this issue. It's a very complex issue. When you're talking about multiple debit networks on the same card, and it is an important competitive imperative for us going forward.
You've got 30 seconds if you want.
Finally, perhaps we've heard from a number of retail groups in particular who approached the committee, its members, asking the debit fees be mandated as flat. We know that one of the competitors has already proposed to go in the debit system on an ad valorem basis. What's Interac's position on mandating a fee that would be structured in a way where there is no suggestion of ad valorem?
So while I can't comment specifically on the ongoing pricing deliberations if within the restructuring project, I can say that our history is based on a simple, transparent, flat fee, switch fee, and we will respect that legacy. And I think it's important to note, with respect to previous testimony, to remember that there are switch fees, and often around the world, even my U.S. card counterparts, those are flat fee. But there are other fees. I believe there's 8 in the United States, other fees and assessments that can have different characteristics. And then there's interchange, which is almost uniformly ad valorem.
Okay.
We have a simple one fee, and it's flat fee.
Thank you. Thank you. Monsieur Laforêt, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Mr. O'Connell. Thank you for being here, because you made an excellent and very clear presentation. I want to thank you for that. I'd like to know, in the current structure, I'll just let you get your earpiece on. And can we restart the timer, please? Great. Okay. Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. Now, in the current structure, there is a flat fee that is charged to acquirers, those who administer the technology, and then they transfer the fee to the merchant with an additional fee. Is that how things operate now?
So from what I heard at the end, we charge a flat fee to the acquirer of 0.8 of a cent, and then together with the other services they provide to the merchant, they would bundle that into their contract with the merchant.
I just want to make sure that I understand. Is it 0.8% or is it 8 cents per transaction or 0.8 cents per transaction? What is the exact flat fee? Well, what about financial institutions that issue debit cards? They receive royalties on purchases made at retailers. How much do they charge? There are financial institutions that issue debit cards to their clients. Do they receive any royalties for usage of the system when a transaction is made?
So no. So in answer to your first question, it is less than a cent, our fee to the acquirers. It's 0.8 of a cent. So it's under a cent that's charged to the acquirers. And no, the issuers don't receive royalties from the point of sale transaction.
That means that the 0.8 cents that is charged on each transaction means that 1 cent goes to the acquirer and Visa earns 0.7 cents per transaction.
In the Interac model, Interac charges the acquirer under a cent to process that transaction from the merchant into the system. We also charge the issuer the same flat fee amount to process the transaction on the other side into the account to ensure that the account the money is available, etc. So those are the only fees that are charged within the Interac debit model. I can't comment on the Visa model.
Now, to be clear, how is it divvied up? How is the charge that is imposed on the merchant broken down? an individual makes a purchase of $100, for example, using a debit card, that transaction will cost 0.8 cents for the $100 transaction. So how is that 0.8 cents broken down? Can you please provide an explanation?
Acquirer 0.8 of a cent to process the transaction, but of course the acquirer has a contract with that merchant and provides other services and processing and the terminal that sits on the point of sale at the merchant location. And so we're part of their operating costs. They would have a contract with the merchant that would bundle their other services and pass those fees on in a competitive environment. Typically, the end merchant cost in the Interac environment is anywhere from 3 to 15 cents at an average of 7 or 8 cents per transaction. And you're right, on the $100, it doesn't matter whether it's a $10 purchase, a $100 purchase, or a $1,000 TV, it's still the same flat fee amount.
J'aimerais ça que vous nous puissiez nous faire parvenir.
I'd like for you to forward that answer in writing and provide a clear breakdown of the fees that are charged to the merchants. MasterCard told this committee that Interac had increased its fees by 60% since last February. Is that accurate? And if it's true, why did it increase its fees by 60%?
Cost recovery basis. Our flat rate switch fee increases or decreases on an annual basis based on the operating costs and needs of the network in any given year. So, for example, historically, our fee has vacillated only from 0.4 of a cent to 0.8 of a cent. And it depends on the needs or the operating expenditures in that given year. So this year we had some investments to make, and we are undergoing a restructuring. And so there was a last year the 0.05 of a cent, which is where MasterCard has put their pricing, which is Interac's last year's rate, and so it has increased just with the cost recovery model.
Une minute, Monsieur Laforêt. Une minute.
Mr. Laforêt, you have 1 minute remaining. Now, with the possible entry of MasterCard and Visa into the debit card market, well, Visa told us that a person who is shopping and makes a purchase may have the choice of using a Visa debit or Interac card. Do you think it's possible for the consumer to be sufficiently informed to make a wise choice that is most suitable?
I was saying on the priority routing issue, when you do have two competing networks on the same card, it does raise some issues of transparency and choice for the consumer. I would agree with you. I think it's interesting that neither MasterCard or Visa allows each other's applications to ever co-reside on the same card. And there are some reasons for that. So today there's no confusion in the market. When you pull out a credit card as a consumer, you know the payment vehicle you're using. It's your Visa or your MasterCard. When you pull out your Interac card, you know that is debit. So it's important that transparency be instituted in the market. If we're going to have the same card with two competing debit networks on it, financial institutions would need to clearly disclose that there are two debit networks on that card. The cards would need to be clearly branded with both networks in a way that doesn't confer advantage on either of them. Number three, consumers would need to be educated on how the system works at the point of sale, and that terminal would need to display both networks clearly, fairly, and on the same screen, allowing the consumer to make an informed choice and the merchant to be able to influence that choice.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. We'll go now to Mr. Wallace, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming this morning, Mr. O'Connell, and for your presentation. And just two quick follow-ups before I get into a couple of questions. In your opening statement, you say this, okay, and I'm quoting you from your what you have here, and there's why I think there's maybe a little bit of confusion. You say in one paragraph, and we do not charge fees to merchants or consumers, and then 2 paragraphs later it says, or have a record of being Canadian merchants' low-cost payment option. So there's some confusion. When I heard that, I thought, well, you didn't just tell us that you actually do charge a fee to the acquirer. They bundle it together with all their other fees, and they do charge the merchants for it. Eventually, it gets to them, and it's a flat fee. And I understand that, and I understand why. Just a clarification. And the other issue, and I'm not sure if Mr. Matigue was on that route or not, but my question is, one of my initial questions, you're clearly not here to say, hey, keep competition out of the marketplace. Is it of your opinion, in your organization's opinion, that Visa, debit, MasterCard is coming to Canada regardless? Would that be your opinion?
Stronger than that. When I joined Interact 2 years ago, and we started the conversations with the Competition Bureau shortly thereafter, Visa and MasterCard were in process of entering the Canadian debit market. They are here. There is over 1 million cards.
You're here advocating for your organization that you need legislative change, or I don't know if it's legislative change, but a change to your operating rules that they have for Interact, so that you're able to compete against those new players in the marketplace. Basically, is what you're telling us here today. Is that correct?
Well, just your first question, you're right. We're like a wholesaler, so we provide a fee to the acquirer who then adds other services. We're an operating cost to them, and you're right, it does reach the merchants. I am here not to prescribe legislative remedies or any prescriptive remedy. I am here to indicate that we do not have a level playing field, and to indicate that Interact cannot survive if there isn't a level playing field. So that goes along, I'll just go along what the exact attributes of that. Number one, it's our internal. We need to remove the artificial funding and governance constraints that currently are on Interact. We are different than our competitors, and that's consent order imposed.
Consent order imposed, okay.
So we are under, as you know, in discussions with the Bureau on restructuring ourselves internally, so we have the same capabilities as our competitors. But the second is we need to ensure that consumers and merchants are making overt and open, informed choices in the marketplace. And this is what I think Mr. Matigue was getting to. Consumers need to know the payment vehicle they're using. They shouldn't be thinking they're using Interact when they're actually using a competitor's brand. That's going to erode my market share. Merchants need to clearly understand the payment options available to them and their associated costs, and they need to choose the options that they wish to accept. So merchant contracts, which is an issue in the industry, need to be clear language, ensuring that the payment options are separately priced. They can't be blended or bundled, because that takes away, in my opinion, our strategy and the Interact low-cost, sustainable option. Okay.
On the consent order piece changes, how quickly do they need to happen for you to be in the marketplace in a timely manner?
Yesterday.
Okay, so you're active on that file. You've been in my office before. You're active on that file now, right?
We are. I mean, they take their statutory duty to protect the interests, but
Dan's slides, maybe I misinterpreted or I have further view. Like, how are the banks not in a conflict of interest when they are customers of Visa debit and MasterCard debit, and they're on your board? How is that not a conflict? And do you foresee that you'll need a different government or governance structure if the consent order requests that you're making do come through and you're able to compete in the marketplace?
I've been very open as to our governance challenges and the challenges of any association model where an organization is governed by its very users. It's tremendously difficult to gain consensus, and it moves at the pace of the slowest. I think it's important to note that the board itself has acknowledged that in their recommendation and support of the proposal to restructure the organization that could be managed by an independent board. They've also had the foresight to set up an independent board that is now looking at many of the aspects of the future restructuring. Now, let's remember that the Interacts Association's board was instituted by the consent order itself. And under our Memorandum of Association, each board member has a contractual duty to operate in the best interests of the association. And we regularly remind them of this obligation. And under the governance model I have, I must operate under the belief that they are adhering to this obligation, and I know they take it seriously.
I got one more question. You may not have thought of anybody asking this question, but the concern around here has been that here is the credit card industry, which basically has two big major players trying to get into a debit marketplace. And they've done it elsewhere, but they're trying to do it here. Is there any discussion at your end about getting into the credit side of the business to take on, to be another player in the credit marketplace at all in Interact's future?
Just very briefly, Mr. O'Connell.
I would say I can't divulge our strategies fully, but I would say that if we are able to restructure and this level playing field is instituted, that would be a product that we would have to strongly consider.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Mr. Thibault, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. O'Connell, for coming here today. Just a little bit off of what Mr. Wallace was talking to. Maybe you can clarify for me then. You're looking for a level playing field. So if MasterCard and Visa were not considering introducing debit cards in Canada, would Interact still be considering restructuring or higher fees?
Yes, in a word, we would be still considering restructuring. The fact of the matter is the governance is challenged in its current, in reacting to the market, product innovations, infrastructure, and so forth. And I think Interact needs to evolve because we're also competing on a world stage as well.
Okay, so if we're looking then at interchange fees and an increase in the cost of payment transactions to merchants, then merchants have to pass these increases off to the consumers. If debit services by Interact are increased, what benefits will consumers see, if any, or will they just be seeing higher prices?
You have to remember that the debit market's changing. Visa and MasterCard is here, and that market is going to change whether Interact changes or not. And so if Interact is not able to restructure, this market's going to be left with a duopoly of those two competitors. So I believe we have to change for the merchants, and I passionately believe that. I started that 2 years ago this way. We are already seeing the countervailing force that Interact is with respect to pricing, if you look at MasterCard's strategy. So I think it's imperative, in fact, to keep prices down, that Interact is a viable player in this industry.
Okay. So then, to what extent do you think the suggestion by the CFIB, Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and the Stop Sticking It To Us coalition, that merchant fees related to debit transactions should be a fixed amount per transaction rather than a percentage of the value of that transaction?
I think that has a lot of merit. Ad valorem, or percentage of value, emanated from the credit business where there is risk inherent in the transaction. That's not a good funds model transaction. Interact has a flat switch fee because there is much less risk in that transaction as far as, an unsecured loan. So whether that's $100 of groceries or whether you have enough in your bank account to do a $1,000 TV, we see the argument, and Interact lives it, and we're here today with flat fee, single fee, switch fee.
So then, in your opinion, sir, what would it take to prevent Interact from adopting the debit schemes as talked about ad valorem, or the percentage of the cost of purchase as proposed by Visa and MasterCard?
So, can you ask that in a...
Sure. Well, what can we do to avoid the percentage, the ad valorem, or the percentage of the purchase? We're hearing loud and clear from many of the consumer groups that, and the merchants, that that's what they're concerned for, is going away from the flat fee to the percentage fee. How can we prevent that? What are the steps that we can do to ensure that we're keeping things fair?
Well, we're going to be clear and transparent with all of our fees. We are, as I've said, we are going to open up our books to the federal government on an annual basis. And as I've said, we are, in our new pricing, respecting the flat fee history of Interact in order to preserve our relationship, which is so important in our strategy with the merchant community. We need the merchant community to somewhat be architects of their own cost future in debit. We are going to put a balanced value proposition out there, as we've always done. It will be clear and transparent. And we need that acceptance community, because that's a strategic bastion we have today. We have acceptance from coast to coast. Visa and MasterCard are attempting, you heard from MasterCard, on a business case by business case basis to gain merchant acceptance. And we believe we need to put a balanced, and we need to listen to the merchant community about their concerns about ad valorem, because we need to appeal to that side of this two-sided market.
Perfect. How much time do
you have 2 minutes.
2 minutes, perfect. You talked a little bit about something, 0.5% switch fee by MasterCard, I believe, in your opening statements, and that is, I think you said it's larger than any other MasterCard fee that you've seen in the world. Can you clarify for me? Did I hear that incorrectly?
Yes, in fact, it's the opposite. So I was commenting on MasterCard's testimony that their current rate in the Canadian market is 0.5 of a cent switch fee. And I believe they currently have interchange set at 0 basis points. We've seen that before. What I was saying is, while it's tempting to comment as a cost recovery organization that knows the economics of this business, that has very little marketing or R&D on the sustainability of that, I was just pointing out that in all other markets that I know of around the world, that is drastically lower than the Maestro and MasterCard debit pricing.
Okay, so obviously we're not going to get into assumptions as to why they're doing that, but thank you for clarifying that for me. But if it's cost recovery, and we're hearing the merchants worrying about their costs increasing and consumers' costs, or consumers will ultimately see these costs, what do we tell consumers? What are we telling them about the work that we're doing right now, where we're hearing more and more people saying, or more and more organizations going to be saying, that their costs are going to be going up? And right now, we all know that we're in a downturn. What do we tell them when corporations like, I'm trying to do some math here, you're saying you're getting about approximately 2 cents, or just under 2 cents per transaction for about 4 billion transactions?
Interact does not. Interact just receives the 0.8 of a cent. The acquirer has various contracts and pricing agreements with their merchant base. And the average is, I think, 8 cents per transaction is the average debit merchant cost, which is a payment to the acquirer.
So you get 8 cents from the acquirer, and then 0.8 cents from the acquirer. Do you get anything from the issuer as well then, just for clarification?
Yes, the same 0.8 of a cent.
So you add those two together gives you about 1.6, correct? So it's just under 2 cents per transaction.
Right. So the 0.8 of a cent is to process a transaction, and I won't get into the details, but in a single message transaction set. So it's 0.8 of a cent for each message, if you will. So it's processing the transaction from the merchant terminal into the Interact member network, etc., 0.8 of a cent, and then on the issuer side, processing the transaction from the account through into the Interact member network, and so forth.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thibault. We'll go to Ms. Cody, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Connell, for appearing before us today and bringing your viewpoints to the table. We certainly appreciate it. These are going to be rapid-fire questions because I only have 5 minutes, so Forgive me for asking a lot of questions in a brief period of time. I guess I want to just start with following up on a couple of themes that are going here, and just for clarity. So you currently have the opportunity to levy an interchange fees, but you will not do so, correct? You currently have the opportunity to levy an interchange fees, but you do not. You use a switch fee instead.
We have not done so and have no plans to do so because interchange is not the problem here. The change is that Interac it cannot be responsive in its current structure.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want to talk about the situation in the United States with the STAR network, for example. I think it's sort of your equivalent, or was your equivalent, is your equivalent in the United States. And as you know, Visa and MasterCard are now dominant in that market, for example. What do you think was the challenge for the STAR network in facing the Visa MasterCard surge in debit card?
It's a great proxy. It underscores the urgency that we have here before us, the fact that Visa and MasterCard are already in market. So STAR Networks was arguably the closest thing to Interac you're going to get in North America. They basically invented the PIN debit network in the United States. And then through many years of expansion, 5 years ago, STAR Network had close to 60% market share of the United States PIN debit market, in the high 50s. That's when Interlink, or Visa PIN debit, aggressively entered the market. At that point, they had 10%. They employed their strategies. It was a free-for-all, unlevel playing field, and so forth. Today, STAR Networks is, I think, at 25%, and Visa is in the high 40s, if not 50% of that market.
What was the result of Visa or MasterCard taking the predominant lead? What was the end result to consumers, to merchants?
Unfortunately, and this is what I meant in my opening remarks, as we've consulted and we've learned from history, unfortunately, the STAR Networks and NICE Network decided that they were going to play a price matching game with respect to interchange with Visa. So in their fear, they were different than Interact. However, Visa already had acceptance at all the merchants in credit, and they played the honor all cards. You remember that whole fight where if you took a Visa credit, you had to take a Visa debit. So Visa didn't have the impediment they have today here in Canada, whereby Interac debit is accepted across the country. But what ended up happening was a spiraling of interchange to where I think the United States is the highest interchange market in the world today.
Thank you. I got two more questions. One is, you're currently regulated by the Canadian Payments Association. We're all aware of that. What would be your understanding for Visa and MasterCard? Would they be settled here through the Canadian Payments Association, or are they going to be settled through Bank of America in the United States?
You are correct. So we settle through the Canadian Payments Association, and we believe that the rules framework and a fully Canadian settlement option meets our needs, and it's important for the debit system that we operate here in Canada. Our items are safe and secure and in Canada. But I must say, as far as commenting on the others, after reviewing the testimony of my counterparts at Visa and MasterCard, I'm not sure I understand their clearing and settlement well enough to form an opinion of its safety and soundness or of its risk.
Do you understand that they'll be settled through the United States Bank of America? Is that your understanding?
I believe, yes, again, it was confusing in the testimony, but I do believe that, yes, they settle through the United States and the bank balance sheets there.
One quick final question. What would happen if we do not intervene in this particular situation, if nothing is done coming out of this, that we let market forces bear? What do you think would be the outcome?
Just very briefly, Mr. O'Connell.
Sorry?
Very briefly, please.
Okay. Again, I want to reiterate, I'm not prescribing a solution, legislated or otherwise, but if the marketplace either doesn't step up and follow our lead for transparency and choice and the same rules for all three competitors in this market, and Interac is also not allowed to change its internal structure, We will go the way of star networks and NICE and so forth in the United States, and we will no longer be a countervailing force, and there won't be a Canadian option in the debit infrastructure in Canada, in my opinion. We just will not be successful.
Thank you. Monsieur Bouchard, s'il vous plaît, pour 5 minutes.
Mr. Bouchard, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Mr. O'Connell. You talked to us about your system, your debit system, and the fact that it has always been a low-cost system. You claimed that this has always been the case, and that now you are seeking to change your status to go from a non-profit association to a profit-making association. And if I understand correctly, you are ready to make that commitment. So I'd really like to know from you, what kind of commitment are you really ready and willing to make, and what kind of guarantee are you proposing to consumers? Given your history, will you continue to make sure that your fees remain low cost?
The commitment that we are here making and willing to enshrine is that we will open our books on the revenues and costs of these lines of business to the Department of Finance or to the government to ensure that my statements about being a low-cost provider, are not hollow. They are not trust me statements. You will be able to see the returns inherent in our business. And we're willing to be accountable to that because we realize we do need to change to a commercial structure in this competitive environment against two very well-financed commercial companies that have long ago shed their association governance and other status. But we're willing to be accountable that there will not be excessive profit-taking in that endeavor, and that is not why we're doing this.
I'd like to get back to the issue of your change in status. Whose interests are being served by changing status, by becoming a commercial enterprise? Are you serving the interests of owners, retailers, consumers? Is it to make more money? What is your driving force to change from a non-profit association to a commercial enterprise?
To survive, and to survive on behalf of merchants and consumers, and to answer your question, I think the entire marketplace, the viability of Interac is a benefit to the marketplace. We're seeing it even today with how Visa and MasterCard are having to operate their business and try and penetrate this marketplace. So I think in short answer to your question, I think it's important to the merchant economy going forward that we have a countervailing Canadian force. I think it's important to Canada. When you look at after 9/11, the United States elevated payments to the status of a national infrastructure. And here we are, we're talking about the debit infrastructure, Canadians' access, to their accounts. I think it's important that we continue to have a Canadian option in this area, and we're not outsourcing our debit retail payments market to the United States. So I think this restructuring will allow Interac to benefit all users of the system, including the issuers and the merchants and consumers, with a fair and balanced value proposition.
Okay, 1 minute, Mr. Bouchard.
1 minute, Mr. Bouchard. Mr. O'Connell, you talk about the market. You talk about a Canadian option. And in your opening statement, you say that you are present from coast to coast. You also said that you have been in existence for the last 25 years and that you have experienced phenomenal growth, and that you expect to continue to grow now into the future. Now, is this going to depend on your status as a non-profit association, or is future growth going to be contingent on converting to a commercial structure? Please talk to me about your real motivation. You say that you are changing this because of market forces, but really, what is your main motivation?
My main motivation is to ensure that Interact survives and is a viable choice for merchants and consumers and issuers in this marketplace going forward, period. That success that you're talking about, and, you know, the consent order was enshrined with 15 years ago in a very different marketplace. Visa and MasterCard have proven in almost all jurisdictions around the world that they take over the market at the expense of the domestic debit provider, usually because that debit provider is hindered in these ways. We are standing up and saying, no, we need to restructure, and there needs to be a level playing field in this market, and then we can compete and succeed against Visa and MasterCard due to our balanced value proposition.
Okay, thank you. A seat. We'll go to Mr. Lake, please.
Yeah, I guess just a couple of clarifications. So I think in answer to Mr. Thibault's question, you clarified that the charges per transaction aren't 0.8 cents per transaction, but actually 1.6 cents per transaction in total. Not they're individual, but two charges of 0.8 cents per transaction. Every transaction results in 2.8 cent revenues to Interact. Is that accurate? One from the acquirer, one from the issuer?
Right, 0.8 to the acquirer, 0.8 to the issuer.
How many transactions per year?
Last year, I believe, in Interact Direct Payment, you're around 3.6 billion transactions.
0.6 billion? Yeah. With a B. Okay.
It's interesting. When the consent order was issued, Interact Direct Payment was fledgling. It was really a business case being launched. The consent order was issued when shared cash dispensing, or our ATM business, was what Interact was. Today, the Interact ATM business is 250 million transactions. If you want to juxtapose the two services from a transaction standpoint, it's quite interesting.
Is there any revenue from those 250 million transactions, the ATM transactions?
Yes, we have the same. We have switch fee.
Oh,
revenue.
so that's the same. Is that okay? So that's the same 0.8 cents per transaction?
There's different fees again set on a cost recovery basis under the same model, and they're flat switch fees, but they're respective of the ATM business.
Okay, and in terms of.
And we don't charge, as we've talked about, we don't charge any additional fees in that business, such as the convenience fees and so forth. That's nothing to do with Interact.
Other revenues on your email money transfer. What kind of charges are involved there?
Again, we're a wholesale charge to the issuers. I'll have to get back to you with respect to making sure that I get any of the all the specific charges, but again, it's a flat fee.
Okay, and I would imagine on the Interact Online, is it again separate, a different type of charges, or?
Yeah.
Okay, so you could endeavor to give us get us the charges for the ATM, the email money transfer, the Interact Online.
Yes, where
what
I can,
those numbers
I will. Yeah,
okay.
And all 5 services would be in the restructuring, would be looked at from a competitive model standpoint.
Okay. In terms of taking a look at what you're asking for, of course, try and take a look at it from our constituents' standpoint, because it's our constituents that have a lot to say, I think, these days, probably more to say these days about the banking system in general and credit cards and debit cards and everything else. And one of the things that's been a strength here in Canada is the strength of our banking system, our financial system, ranked #1 in the world. And I think President Obama even was quoted to say Canada has shown itself to be a pretty good manager of the financial system and the economy in ways that we haven't always been here in the United States. And Canadians are very protective, I think, of that system. And I think what I'd like to hear is a little bit about how the Canadian consumers' experience will change based on the changes that you're looking for right now? What would you say to our constituent who might be concerned about this? How will their experience be better?
So how will their experience be better if Interact...
We made the changes you're asking for.
Okay, so the first change is just the restructuring of Interact in order for it to be able to compete and continue to be there for consumers. And I think consumers over the past 20 years have come to rely and they have a, in some respects, debit in Canada has been a love affair with Interact. So I think it's important that our viability be continued. And you're talking about the experience, so beyond that, if you're talking about a level playing field, the experience, I think, needs to be different. Cardholders should understand the payment vehicle. So in this new multi-network world that we find ourselves right now, and we're no longer in the dressing room, we're out on the ice, and Visa, MasterCard are operating around us here. In this multi-network world, I think it's important that consumers continue to understand the payment vehicle they're using and not be confused that they think they're using their Canadian Interact and they're in fact using another brand. I think it's important at the point of sale. Merchants as well understand they aren't having contracts put in front of them where Visa, MasterCard, and Interact rates are blended. They can't tell, they can't make an overt choice between them. We shouldn't have honor all cards rules as we saw in the United States.
I just want to clarify this. I mean, I'm not talking about all of the
last
different...
question.
Okay, sure. Not talking about all of the different cards that people may use, but for me as a consumer, if I walk in to use my my BMO bank card like I always do, how will my experience be better? I mean, what innovation is going to improve my ability to shop and buy the things I want to buy with my card?
Mr. O'Connell, please.
An immediate innovation that we are endeavoring to roll out in this game in the debit wars is, for example, the tap and go, contactless. As you notice, the U.S. credit card companies have their products in market. Interact does not, by virtue largely of our inability within our structure to move not at the pace of the slowest. So that's an example. And then if you move to mobile payments, you move to other information on your chip card. This market is evolving dramatically. And what I'm asking for with respect to a level playing field and Interact's restructuring just will enable Interact to provide those services to Canadians.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Rhoda, please.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. O'Connell, for coming out today. You talk about a flat fee, and that's what the charge is, the switch fee, which is basically 0.8 cents. And there's no desire to change to or requirement to change to a percentage or an ad valorem fee. Now, the 0.8 is what you're charging. The bank then takes it and marks it up between 3 and 15% per transaction. What's to stop the individual banks from going to an ad valorem fee if they were doing business with you? Do you have some kind of agreement or some kind of restriction with the banks that are out there who are actually offering the cards to individuals?
So you're referring to the acquirer marking up the fee?
The acquirers, yes. You're charging a set fee. Do you have any agreements with the acquirers, with the individual banks or institutions who issue the debit cards to restrict what they charge?
Right, and I think you're getting at a concern of mine. Yes, we publish our rates on our website each year.
And that you publish them, but do you have an agreement with them that limits people from
yes, and then
they
have in their contracts they have an agreement that though any network fee charged is a pass-through to the merchant, and then they layer on the other fees. But I am concerned as to we don't have that downstream visibility. There have been previously tactics, and this is what I'm getting at. It is so important that these contracts between the merchants and the acquirers are clear language, that costs are divided out overtly so the merchant can see what his acceptance decision or her acceptance decision is going to mean to their costs.
Let me just take it one step further. And we see this happening with a lot of the credit cards, and we'll take it from the credit cards and bring it over for the Interac Association and as far as Visa and MasterCard. Do you see these cards moving to a premium level or a loyalty card level where there will be extra cost piled onto the merchants and eventually having to be passed on to the consumers? Do you see the cards moving to that area if there's increased competition or with increased competition?
I can't speak to the strategies of Visa and MasterCard, of course. That's currently not under Interac's purview or planning, but of course we're the network, remember, in the middle. With respect to card rollout strategies and so forth, that's the purview of the issuer, largely.
Okay, very good. Now, we talked about STAR and NICE in the United States, and what you're asking for is basically not much more than let's restructure, or the permission to restructure your governance model. That's all you're asking for. That's the main change. Now, NICE and STAR, what was their system of governance over there? Why did they suddenly drop in light of Visa and MasterCard's competition? And what will prevent you from dropping just with a simple change in governance?
So I hope it hasn't been lost. There's more than an internal restructuring of Interac needed with respect to how this debit marketplace evolves. So the level playing field that I'm talking about, so consumers and merchants can overtly choose Interac away from the competitors and their various pricing schemes and so forth, is imperative to our success, as are rules of the game. Interac being the only competitor in the market that's subject to scrutiny and review of all of its new product sets, which we do so today through the CPA, and the other competitors rolling out contactless and pinless products after a decision made in Purchase New York or Foster City with not the same level of scrutiny or review, is a problem. And so, you know, I am trying to talk well beyond the restructuring with respect to Interac's success. Now, you talked about STAR and NICE, and in answer to a previous question, they were private and then went public companies. The difference between our two strategies and our two markets, as I said, and it's a massive difference because this is a two-sided market. When Visa went in aggressively to the debit market, they were already there. They already had, from coast to coast in the United States, they had an acceptance base. So when that acceptance base is ubiquitous among all the brands, what happened there was the competition shifted to how can I keep issuer cards within my brand. And unfortunately, in STAR's case, their demise was they then started raising interchange to try and incent the issuers because it was a card battle only. It's not the case here in Canada. You've heard testimony prior that Visa and MasterCard, in fact, one of their main problems, and we see it in their pricing strategies, is trying to get merchant acceptance. So at Interac, I believe that our restructuring, through partnering with the merchant community, we can have a low-cost model, and if the merchants are architects of their own future in choosing Interac in the majority of the segments, I think we have a viable strategy with respect to Visa and MasterCard.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Deckert, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. O'Connell. We've heard from merchant groups and other organizations that Interac is the lowest cost form of payment to the merchant, even lower, in fact, than using cash itself. I doubt that most consumers know this, however. I certainly didn't know it personally until I'd listened to some of the witnesses. And as you may know, the Finance Committee is currently studying consumer financial literacy. Do you think that merchants should make this fact known to consumers, and do you think that it would be a fair or good idea for merchants to offer their customers a discount for payments using their Interac debit card?
I'm certainly in favor of informing consumers as to the the cost of that, of the debit and the electronic payment method. I don't know if it is only the merchant's responsibility to do that. I think that all stakeholders in the market should be doing that. And I think it's good for the economy if that were to happen, because we're going to take some costs out of the system.
Does Interac have any plans to make that fact known to consumers?
If we had any marketing budgets, I sure would. And I think it's important that you do find already in the merchant community. I bet you each of you at some point in time has run into a merchant which are beginning, like in the United States they do, is to suggest a preferred brand to lower their costs. I get sent pictures all the time where signs are going up saying help us and use Interac Debit. So I think that groundswell is happening, and that underpins our strategy on the merchant acceptance side.
I think if we all used debit a little more, we could probably, reduce the cost of things, and that would be good for consumers and everyone in our economy. Let me ask you another question. As you know, since 2006, the Conservative government has lowered the GST from 7 to 6 to 5%. What impact did that sales tax reduction have on the volume of sales enjoyed by merchants across Canada and the volume of payments processed by Interac?
I'd have to take a look at that from a transaction standpoint and do some data mining there to see if we could find a correlation with the date from a transaction. But I'm happy to take a look at that to see if we can find it.
I think it would be interesting to know. What is your guess? Was that a good thing for the Canadian economy?
I can't hazard a guess.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there's 2 minutes left. If Mr. Lake, do you want to follow that up?
I just, you referenced the phrase low-cost provider several times, but I'm not clear on what definition you're attaching to that. I'd like to hear a little bit more defining, especially as we talk about the future. You say that Interac will continue to be a low-cost provider, but I think that my constituents probably hearing that would want to know what that means. Low cost relative to what?
So I say a low-cost provider. You've heard the testimony from MasterCard's current pricing strategy into the market. We have been historically for 15 years since Interac Debit began a low-cost provider. I think that anyone arguing that 0.4 to 0.8 of a cent isn't low cost. What I'm saying in the future is that it is our strategy to offer a balanced value proposition going forward to maintain that primacy. I spoke of the need for us to partner with the merchant acceptance community. If I layer on too many costs, and internally I'm willing to open those books up to the federal government as far as any excessiveness, and then if there were interchange, that level, if I layer on too many costs, the merchants are going to begin to choose away from Interac and choose MasterCard and Visa.
The question I have, the concern that some would have is that low cost right now at 10 cents per transaction. If you were to be 12 cents in the future, that would be low cost in one way. Another way of looking at it would be that if a competitor is charging 2.5% and you're charging 2.25, that would be low cost in a completely different way. Maybe you can shed some light on which way you're talking about.
It's a great point. We feel we need to have a distinct choice for merchants. Because if the price compression happens on the merchant, and these are I'm going to accept all 3 cards, and before long our acceptance advantage will erode. So we feel we have the ability, being a not-for-profit for so many years, and having this strategy and having this ubiquitous acceptance, we can have a distinct choice for merchants and a distinct cost advantage.
Okay, thank you. Go to Mr. McKay, please.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. Your testimony has been very clear and very helpful today. Thank you for it. Generally competing with yourself doesn't work, and you have built into your structure inherent conflicts, which it's very difficult to see how this is actually going to be resolved. You have on your board Bank of Montreal of an interest in MasterCard, TD of interest in Visa, et cetera, and I can't even imagine all of the other conflicts. So you want to move out of that conflict and acknowledge conflict, and you want to move and get a change to the consent order. What I don't understand is, as long as those conflicts exist, how can you actually ask for a change in the consent order if the board itself, even moving to a kind of a non-interest board model, still has these inherent conflicts? Aren't you just simply the financial version of a dead man walking?
So clarify for me, so how can we proceed with the Bureau with the board we have and the governance challenges?
I don't understand how you're going to ask the competition board for a variation on your consent order if those conflicts still exist.
So I can't go into the specific deliberations. So the major purpose of the consent order deliberations and the change we're requesting is to ensure that the organization going forward is governed independently by its users, and that decision making is defined by competitive terms, not any other factors, and so forth. That very board has sponsored that restructuring project, and it has been in discussions with the Bureau, and are ready to move to that, recognizing that that's what Interact needs.
But why would Bank of Montreal, for instance, want you to get a change so that you can compete with their Maestro product? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I think just because the Bank of Montreal may support competition in the debit market doesn't mean they de-support Interact. I think Interact is very important, and they're demonstrating this in the costs and time over the past 2 years they've put into this endeavor. I think that from an issuer standpoint, and that you'll have to ask more details of them, but I think it's very important to have Interact as a countervailing force with respect to their dealings going forward.
I agree with you from the standpoint of competition in the marketplace and consumers, what's in the best interest of the public. I don't quite see it from Bank of Montreal's standpoint. When MasterCard is here, as I said, Maestro is bin-based, real-time, blah, blah, blah. Maestro delivers more value to consumers and merchants than Interact through enhanced security, greater network reliability, and international reach. And I was kind of surprised by that statement, because I didn't think that their security is all that much greater than yours, nor their reliability that much greater than yours, or their international reach that much greater than yours. So if you could offer your observations on those statements by one of your board members.
I certainly, as I said in my opening comments, I support those statements. I understand the need for MasterCard and Visa to try and convey a value proposition and why they're absolutely needed in this marketplace. And they've chosen to take the tenets of we're more secure, Interact isn't online, and we're international. And I think in my opening statements, I was able to, I hope, clarify that what's true and untrue there. We are online. We are one of the most secure debit networks in the world by almost any measure. And I think I pointed out, you know, some of what's going on the credit card fraud side, which is their very systems. So I would agree with you. Interact as a service is not broken. It is a world-class infrastructure and a great national payment system. Interact as an organization in a new marketplace and being able to compete with these multi-network environment, that's the issue.
Thank you for flatly rejecting that nonsense. MasterCard claims its fee for debit card transaction is half a cent. Yours is 0.8 of a cent. Looks like predatory pricing, smells like predatory pricing, might even be predatory pricing. You're pretty experienced with this market. and you're running it on a break-even basis. On the face of it,
Okay.
It looks like they're trying to muscle your market. Is that correct?
Very briefly, Mr.
As I said, it is very different pricing that they have in anywhere in the world, either the MasterCard debit and the Maestro, which, and yes, I'm in a cost recovery model. I know my marketing and R&D budgets, and I know that we vacillate from 0.4% to 0.8% without any return.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Chong, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Mr. O'Connell. Now, you're here on on behalf of the Interact Association and its board of 61 members, I believe it is.
Board is 14. It has 61 members in total. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. 61 members.
Yeah.
Of the association.
Vacillate, yeah. So over 60 members.
And my understanding is that that's the current structure of the organization. My understanding is also that there is an interim board that has been tasked with negotiating the new terms of what Interact's fee structures would look like, provided that the Competition Bureau amends the consent order. Is that correct?
Correct. The current board recognized that for the future restructuring, there's a limited mandate of an independent board. It's composed of senior merchants, an issuer, the former founder and CEO of Star, who loves to tell us what not to do, and a number of other acquirers. Its purpose is to, number one, look at the future competitive model of all 5 services and what pricing structure is going to respect and entail success there. And also, because all the members of the association will become clients if the restructuring goes through, it was felt that an independent board needed obviously to oversee those things.
So this interim board of 7 members will form the basis of the new board of the new for-profit entity if the transition to a new organization, a new for-profit commercial entity is allowed. So the views of this interim board, I think, are pretty important with respect to the future of the Interact system in Canada, provided that the Competition Bureau grants that amended consent order. So my question to you is, in your opening remarks, you remarked on the fact that internal changes to Interact are not enough, and that 3 additional things need to happen in order to ensure a competitive payment system in Canada. First, a need for greater transparency in cardholder choice. Second, a need for greater transparency in merchant choice. And third, having the same basic rules for all providers. Can you tell this committee what the views of the new interim board are with respect to these issues, and more generally with respect to the future of the payment system in Canada?
I would say they echo, they completely would underscore the need that beyond, intelligent and proper pricing and an independent board that's governed independently of its users, they support that if merchants are not being given overt choice or clear understanding of Interact's value proposition versus the other 2 competitors, if the 2 competitors are subject to different rules in bringing out new products and different levels of scrutiny than Interact, then Interact is not going to be successful. So they support those, in addition to cardholders needing to understand the brand they're using and the payment vehicle they are using on the debit card.
In terms of at the point of sale, choice at the point of sale, so that when somebody's using debit, they're being given a choice as to which debit system they wish to use?
They would echo that if the Interact brand is confused in any way in a multi-brand situation on the card, that's to our detriment, and that it doesn't adhere to our tenets of consumer choice and then merchant choice.
In other words, allowing the consumer to choose which of 2 or 3 debit systems they can use at the point of sale.
Right, and that has to be overt, and these tactics are very important. If you look at the U.S. debit wars, the tactics that were employed around, are the brands of the 2 debit network not disadvantaged in any, that they're both prominently displayed in an equal fashion? Is the screen, you guys have seen the Air Canada case around, Air Canada putting itself first on the screen to select, and WestJet and everything below it. Well, you get this default behavior happening. That can't happen with the Interact brand, or it's going to be detrimental to our future success. So those are the types of things, in addition to the rules framework and the scrutiny, that we're talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chong. We'll go to Mr. Thibault, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to kind of finalize what we were talking about earlier. So we've figured out it's about 1.6 cents per transaction, 0.8 cents from either side, which is low cost. I'm not going to disagree with you on that. At about $4 billion transactions, that's about $400 million, and it's all cost recovery, correct? So all of the money that you're getting back is cost recovery?
No, I don't know how you're. Well, I can't divulge the. You're way off on the.
That's fine. The whole point is it seems to be that you're successful in what you're doing, correct? You're a successful organization?
We have been successful in a single debit provider market with no well-financed U.S. Competitors when everyone was on the same page at the same time and instituted a national debit service, yes. But as we've seen around the world, we are the last remaining association in North America and one of a handful left in the entire globe. And that's for a reason. The market evolves too fast now. There are too many competitors. The technology has changed so much. If you think about, where's the card going? You already have a chip on the card. Then you think about what happens to that in a mobile world with our cell phones. You have multiple payment applications on your cell phone. We need to react faster than ever before, and we're in a very different marketplace. That's why we need to change.
So with that success, though, why do you think that Visa and MasterCard and the financial institutions that were issuing these cards, why do you think that, in your opinion, of course, why do you think that they've decided to promote their debit products in Canada now and at the same time? Can you give me your opinion on that?
Okay. Visa and MasterCard, although MasterCard a while ago, 5 years ago, Visa is newly public. It shed its association status. It is aggressively penetrating many markets around the world. 3.6 billion transactions is an attractive piece of business. When you layer on other things like chip technology, with Canada moving to chip, it required a wholesale infrastructure change out to the terminals, and it enabled, in somewhat, the ability for multiple applications to more easily sit on the same card. The terminals were being updated anyway, so they could come in and, as you've heard from testimony, incent the acquirers to make sure those terminals are all set up with to accept their transactions. So it was a confluence of factors. It really is a perfect storm with respect to, they have tried to get into this market before, but both in their own internal capability and in addition to some of the market imperatives, they're here. And they are actively, there's cards in market, there's transactions in market, and they're actively trying to take my customers and members away from me.
So if we can bear with me for a second, the picture that's been painted for me over the last little while, we have a debit system where the consumers perceive it as a system that's working great. And I know you've mentioned there's some things that you need to change, and I respect that. But consumers see this system that are working great. I would agree.
I would agree that the system itself works well.
I totally love debit. I rarely carry cash in my own pocket, but you know, it's a system that people rely on right now. We then hear about Visa and MasterCard wanting to come in, and they're using the word competition. And we all know the word competition usually lowers costs, but what we're hearing more and more now is this competition is actually going to increase the costs for SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprise and consumers, potentially because merchants will have to raise their costs if the fees are going up. So I've heard you speak that we need to make this a level playing field. I agree. How do we make it a level playing field for you? Maybe you can give me some of the specifics. And in your opinion, will this benefit the small and medium-sized enterprises and ultimately consumers down the road?
Interac's viability will benefit the small and medium-sized businesses because I can't comment on their strategies or any fee trajectory that they have demonstrated in other markets. But I can say, and we're willing to stand up and be accountable, that I'm not going to adopt that
Thank you very much.
fee strategy.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Connell. Thank you, Mr. Thibeault. Mr. Garneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. I want to focus on the level playing field as well. You have mentioned that it's in all of our interests to have a level playing field. You talk about transparency for all users, and in fact, I believe you said that you would be prepared to enshrine in your operating rules that you would open your books. What I would be interested in knowing is the banks, which are part of your membership, if you like, do they support that as well?
You'd have to specifically talk to each of the banks, and it depends what aspect are you specifically asking about cardholder choice or merchant choice? Because as we've heard, there are differing views as to what constitutes cardholder choice. You heard from the Bank of Montreal, who believe that there's cardholder choice in the customer choosing which financial institution and which debit card they're going to use. They have the choice. If they don't like the brands that are part of that debit card strategy, they can choose away from that institution. Others would have differing views, but I cannot comment on their specific views. Okay,
I was just interested in knowing whether overall they support what you have said in page 8. Talking about retailers, I can understand them wanting to understand and having a level playing field so that they have a better appreciation of how it's going to impact them depending on what systems they choose to go with. From a consumer point of view, I have a little more difficulty, and I can understand what you're suggesting, but ultimately, I've never met a consumer who is particularly preoccupied with knowing what payment system. In fact, most of them are totally ignorant of they know they can do certain things with their card, but they don't really build into their thinking, well, when I go and pay and there are different ways that I can pay, and I'm going to make an informed choice whether it's presented to them or not. They tend to be incentivized by things such as reward programs and others. So are you hoping that the consumer is going to somehow make a decision about which system is better for whatever reason other than possibly their own personal gain?
Yeah, I do think that, well, an argument can be made. There are certainly segments of the consumer base who have no desire nor understanding of what network and what it means to this Visa card versus that Visa card or Interac. But I think it is very important because there are different terms and service features and so forth that are ascribed to these. Now, in debit, it's been, of course, we're not cognizant because our history has been, well, debit's just debit. It's your bank card. Oh, yeah, that Interac. And we have a lot of information that people do have an affinity for Interac, understand it's Canadian, understand it's safe and secure, and it's my money, and so forth. And I think that once you get Visa and MasterCard, and you can imagine the marketing blitz they're going to be doing with respect to getting Canadians' head around we're not just credit, we're debit, and here's why we're super debit. you're going to start to get these distinctions in the marketplace. And I think it's important that when consumers are bombarded with that, and there's different terms of service within the payment vehicle, that they understand what it is that they're choosing overtly, whether it be on screens or whether it be clear that this is, it's not Interac on the back and it looks like a Visa card on the front. These are important things in order for us to compete and succeed.
Thank you. Perhaps one last point. As I understand it, you want to also change from a not-for-profit to a for-profit independent commercial entity, as you say. The arguments are related in part to modernizing your governance, and I think I understand what you're talking about. The other is generating additional capital for investment in your business, and I'm not sure how that part is not that you don't have that latitude presently. Do you not have that latitude presently through your option to increase the switch fee?
Not in any efficient, real fashion, given the governance challenge, given the consent order's prescriptive rules around everything from voting levels and areas in which we switch fee is the only there's among the only way to raise fees. So it's really about putting in place an independent board that can make decisions based on competitive realities, and have the retained earnings to invest in the business on a timely basis, that really cannot be done today. Because today you have to have everyone on the same page at the same time in the same budget cycle to agree to a uniform switch fee, and that has many elements to it. And that consensus building is Herculean. And it's difficult. It didn't used to matter when Visa and MasterCard were associations and also took 4 board meetings to go through a single decision item. But now, on a relative basis, we are the only ones remaining under this structure, so relatively we are at a severe competitive disadvantage.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Monsieur Carrier, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning again, Mr. O'Connell. I want to congratulate you on your presentation and for being in the spotlight for 2 consecutive hours. That's great. Now, I'd like to know some more about the credit card problem that we've just begun to study. A lot of retailers are unhappy about the fact that they are being charged interchange fees that are much higher for premium cards and for the various types of cards that issuers are providing. So that's something that we're looking at right now. So, in your opinion, since you may be competing with credit card companies in the future, do you think that as a possibility, those companies, those credit card companies, may issue premium debit cards that offer ways of attracting consumers so that they can accumulate points, so that they can earn rewards, very similar to certain premium credit cards? And if you are really ready to compete with Visa and MasterCard as a for-profit entity, would you perhaps follow suit? Have you envisioned those possibilities?
Not from the network level, no. Those points programs and so forth are the purview of the issuing bank and how it deals with its customer base. You are correct in that in other jurisdictions around the world, the United States being a prime example, when you look at Visa or MasterCard debit, there are indeed points and rewards and different features and so forth put around those cards, and that's one of the elements of competition. I cannot comment on whether that would be the case in Canada or what the future holds, but there's certainly a precedent for that. You're correct.
J'ai bien entendu que vous...
Now, did I clearly hear you say that you are a low-cost provider in terms of the services that you provide to retailers and consumers? So in the current system, if there were to be no change, would card issuers have the possibility of charging higher interchange fees? Now, is that admissible under current legislation and regulations?
Market and under our current association model governed by the consent order, yes, does allow interchange fees to be set by the Interac Association Board if there's a majority vote to do so. It's currently set at 0 and has always been kept at 0 for the past 13 years.
Merci. Par contre,
Thank you. However, by becoming a commercial for-profit entity, you will compete with companies such as Visa and MasterCard, who very well may use that option to increase their market share in the debit card market and to keep their current clients or future clients. And in fact, they wouldn't be taking away your clients. So if you're saying that it's possible and that's not being done now because you dominate the market, I think it's a danger. I think it's something that you run the risk of confronting. And the more you boast about providing low-cost services, the more vulnerable you may be to your competitors who are seeking to gain a profit.
Remember, there's two. On a switch fee basis, I am confident that we will continue and that we'll be opening up the books and continue on a low-cost basis and respecting the roots of Interac. You're now speaking about, when you talk about interchange, remember that's not a revenue for the network. You are right, that is a mechanism by which my competing networks will be utilizing to try and take my issuers away from me on the bank side. Okay, and that's a competitive reality I face, a multi-network environment that is occurring. So when you look at this movement to incent to move, and you look at the fact that the issuers' costs are also rising, right? Fraud. I mentioned that we had a great success in 2008 at $104 million. Well, I can tell you now, true to organized crime, they have gone back to their usual trajectory. The issuers share the burden of all fraud costs, which is well north of $100 million, and they have customers that are increasingly demanding with respect to the new payment vehicles and features that they want. So the issuers have these costs. They believe they're not readily able to recoup these costs, and so there is a point at which the incentives being offered by my competitors are going to be an offer that the issuers can't refuse. So in our strategy, we need to look at what I call, on the issuing value proposition, a keep from going rate, if you will. I need to make sure that, but given the base of our acceptance, you have to realize that keep from going rate can be significantly and distinctly lower than what Visa and MasterCard has to offer as they penetrate this market. And I believe if we stay true to our roots with the merchant value proposition we have, they will be the architect of their own cost future, and they will continue to accept Interac on a preponderance basis, which will allow our rates to be significantly lower than those competitors, but still give the issuers a value proposition that they need and they deserve.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll finish with Mr. Lake, although I understand you may be sharing your time, Mr. Lake.
I'm just going to, right off the start, let Mr. McTagg ask a quick question he wanted to follow up on.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. In cooperative spirit, very simple. Do you anticipate a demand from issuers to for an interchange fee? And we know it's zero right now. Do you see this happening as part of these changes down the road? Thank you, Mr. Lake. Thank you.
I think the competitive dynamics that I just described mean that I'm going to need an issuer value proposition in a multi-network environment, and I'm going to have to make sure I've got my merchant value proposition. So I think it is a reality that we're going to have to be able to look at charging this keep from going rate, but leveraging our acceptance from coast to coast. When you play that across 3.6 billion transactions, you've got a very fair return at a lower rate than what my competitors can provide.
Okay. Now, just following up on the line of questioning that's come up a few times is regarding this MasterCard switch fee of 0.5% or 0.5 cents, sorry, per transaction. I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about what Visa and MasterCard have done in the U.S., because maybe that would provide us a little bit more context for what we might see here as we move forward, because it does seem like that 0.5 cents per transaction might be kind of an artificial number, temporary number right now. What are they doing in the U.S. and with Visa MasterCard debit?
Are you asking for where is the current switch fee or interchange rate in the U.S.?
Switch fees, interchange rates, whatever the case may be. Where the overall package from a debit standpoint, what are we seeing in the U.S.?
I believe that interchange rates. Now, I'll predicate this. This is my latest belief. I don't know if it's completely up to date, but interchange rates are very similar. The compression is unbelievable on the interchange between Star, MasterCard debit, and Visa, and you're up north of a quarter a transaction, I believe, for interchange. And with respect to switch fees, there's so many fees and assessments in their business models, I can't comment nor discern them. So I think when you look at, and remember, I think my counterpart at MasterCard was talking about the distinction that in the U.S. it's really MasterCard debit, and that means signature debit. PIN debit or Maestro, you have to look to the U.K. to draw some parallels as to their pricing. And I believe the interchange there is it's north of 10 basis points or so forth, and they have we'd have to look at the specific fees. But I think the point is that the pricing in these other markets is, to say the least, markedly different than the current switch fee only with interchange set at 0 basis points.
40 seconds.
Yeah, actually, you know what? I had some other questions, but they'll take longer than 40 seconds, so I'll leave it at this. I just want to commend you, if I could, for being the only witness up here. It's not easy when there's 4 and you actually have some time to catch your breath, but when you're the only one and you're answering all the questions, commend you for taking the time with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. Thank you for being with us here today, for responding to our questions. Thank you, members. Meeting adjourned.